Before we get started, a disclaimer. This video contains my own personal opinions. No comments or claims were made towards any fictional characters or groups of players of varying skill levels in a negative manner. You are more than welcome to agree or disagree respectfully about anything said in this video in the comments below. The only thing I ask is that people be civil with each other. This video is not meant to come off as elitist. This is simply a review of a game mode in Zenless Zone 0 from someone who has been playing the game since day 1 and has had no issues clearing endgame content since. This video will be a mostly negative critique of said game mode, and is not representative of my opinions on the game as a whole. Like I mentioned earlier, I have been playing ZZZ every single day since its release and have nothing but profound love for it. I adore nearly everything about this video game and have spent so much time playing nearly everything it has to offer. However, it is only right to acknowledge the flaws that a video game you love has from time to time. If you don't like the thought of someone critiquing ZZZ just because you heavily enjoy it, I don't really care. Now that that's out of the way, hello everyone. My name is Rune, and I am going to talk about the worst endgame mode in Zenless Zone 0. Before we get started, shout out to the channel members as always, leave a like and consider subscribing afterwards, and let's get into it. Simulated Battle Trial. Introduced in 1.2 and having another version created in 2.1 respectively, the Battle Trial was introduced as ZZZ's third endgame mode. We didn't get Deadly Assault until 1.4, with Shiyu Defense and Hollow Zero Wither Domain being our two mainline endgame modes at the time. Simulated Battle Trial, which I'm going to refer to as Tower for short for the rest of the video, debuted alongside the release of Caesar King, who we will talk about briefly later. The Tower operates as your standard endless challenge mode in ZZZ. It has you fight battles across multiple floors. The only notable differences between other modes is that health does not regenerate between subsequent floors, and both yellow and red attack prompts have been removed from all fights. Players can choose a selection of up to 9 agents and 3 bang boos to bring on a run. This would incentivize the player to bring multiple agents to deal with specific bosses with varying elemental weaknesses. Essentially, players would be crafting 3 teams that had good elemental coverage and team synergy for this massive test of endurance. In the original version of the tower, you would climb each floor endlessly with no interruption. The 9 characters you locked in would be final and would not be changed unless you started over. In the second and harder version of Tower, aptly named Glory, players would play increments of 10 floors worth of battles with one of 3 modifiers to choose from to accompany them on their ascent. After the 10th floor, players would clear the challenge, with the selection of agents being reset upon the start of the next 10 floors. This allowed players to take a break due to the increased difficulty of the mode, and allowed them to scout out the enemies in the coming floors to plan their teams accordingly. Each version of the tower has premium currency rewards tied to their progression, alongside various other goodies that players would naturally enjoy having. However, these rewards are both one-time instances, and, as of the writing of this video, do not refresh unless specific updates in the future state otherwise. You're also given a badge to display on your personal homepage to signify your progress within the tower. Due to the ranked system each tower has, you could get a specific badge for the corresponding rank you achieved whilst playing this mode, and because you could display this on your personal page, this would give the tower a somewhat competitive aspect to it despite it being a single player game mode, acting as a way of showcasing your accomplishments to players on your friends list and players within the newly added outpost or clan system that ZZZ introduced recently. Overall, this is a fairly solid endgame mode. I find it to be quite enjoyable at times, especially because it's difficult and definitely challenging on the player. So what is exactly the point of this video then? Well, it's to highlight the fact that Simulated Battle Trial is not an ideal endgame mode that players should be taking seriously to determine account value or seek validation. What do I mean by this? Well, over the past couple of months, I've received hundreds of comments about my past critiques over boss designs in ZZZ's more popular endgame mode, Deadly Assault. A lot of people express disdain towards my opinions in these videos, but one comment that I would rarely see, yet stick out to me, would be frustrated players recommending me to play the tower mode instead, treating the mode as if it was the definitive try-hard endgame mode in ZZZ because it was the hardest. Not only is this incorrect, but it's also an outright waste of time. Like I mentioned earlier, the tower's rewards are finite, whereas DAs and Shiyu defenses are constantly refreshing. There is virtually no incentive for me to play this endgame mode after I obtain obtain the polychrome rewards. But the difference between climbing tower and getting 9 stars in DA is something we'll touch on later. A lot of people also had issues with the fact that I care a bit more than the average player about the scores that I achieve in Deadly Assault, using the 6 stars is enough for the polychrome statement as a rebuttal to my comments throughout the videos. I like to dub this as the bare minimum mindset. This consists of players who are content with scraping by with the bare minimum, so long as it means that they get their premium currency. There is nothing inherently wrong with playing a gacha game like this. I repeat, there is nothing inherently wrong with playing a gacha game like this. However, it usually results in players never completing character builds, learning basic team rotations, and sometimes not even reading their characters' kits and learning what they do. This ultimately creates people who struggle to clear endgame content due to the bare minimum not being enough anymore, and is a general laziness that seems to be common amongst a lot of free-to-play / low-spending players. Time is definitely an issue that people bring up the most when it comes to this argument, to which I will agree with to some extent. We only have so much time on this planet, and I would rather you guys play other things instead of gacha games. But I find it harder and harder to sympathize with players struggling to build characters outside of artifact luck, when ZZZ has not only been the easiest to farm for materials compared to the other Hoyo games, but has also recently given us an option to automatically farm materials without even entering a battle anymore. I digress though. At the end of the day, I don't have an issue with people who play the game like this. However, I don't have this mindset when it comes to how I like to play gacha games, and just video games in general for that matter. The issue I take with comments like these stem from the lack of open-mindedness these players have when stating them. These comments essentially disregard how I and many other players have fun while playing CCZ. One of the key things that they fail to understand is that some people find enjoyment in striving for more than just the bare minimum and going above and beyond, especially considering the game acknowledges your efforts for doing so. And because more casual players don't want to go through the effort of doing this themselves, they label the players that do put in the effort as tryhards or sweats when it comes to endgame discussions, which is why I like to believe that this is the reason they'd recommend doing the tower instead to these extra players complaining about their score. They view the tower as the super omega hard endgame mode that they can't be bothered to do themselves, but whenever they see other people complaining about scores going down in DA, they default to that quit. And I'm gonna be 100% honest with you guys here, you almost never need to hyper optimize to get high scores in this game. For kills, maybe, but good character builds and understanding of team rotations will always beat out blindly mashing on the recent Void Hunter, even with Ye Xingguang. Yes, people who spend more money in a gacha game are naturally going to score higher in endgame modes like this, but the reason why I and many other players care so much about scores in this mode comes from the satisfaction we get from the ability to score well while spending as little as possible. Yeah, it's just a number in a video game at the end of the day, but it's still something you worked for, especially considering that it's not exactly easy to achieve. Society nowadays has grown to the point where we don't celebrate the little achievements anymore, and I don't really like that. It's extremely gratifying to see a high score that you achieved with a low-cost team or a team that you heavily invested into. One of my friends has been consistently at the top 1% of Deadly Assault scores as a completely free-to-play player, and that's an achievement in itself. The problem with all of this lies with the fact that these same criticisms and sentiments towards Deadly Assault do not translate well when talking about the tower. DA and Shiyu defense are by far the more preferable modes when it comes to gauging account power and player skill, and while tower definitely rewards player skill, I just don't believe that it's something the players should invest their time into after getting all the premium currency from it. Also, I find it a bit ironic considering the bare minimum mindset that these players tend to have applies more to this very mode here than in Deadly Assault. The first battle tower has a secret cutscene that you can unlock after getting to floor 100, but after that, there's virtually no reason to play that version of tower anymore, which leaves the second tower, Glory. This is supposed to be the endgame mode that these players have recommended to me countless times as an end-all be-all mode if I was looking for a more competitive experience. But after getting all the rewards here, the only thing you'd be playing this mode for are the demon medals, medals of honor that indicate clearing a floor flawlessly with no damage taken. There's also a global server ranking which shows the percentage of the player base you're in with a specific agent based off of their collective score in the tower, and includes a title with your general server rank tied to it. So now, you may be asking yourself, Rune, What's the point of all this? Why go on a rant about Deadly Assault when the premise here is regarding the tower? You don't have to play the tower, so why go through the effort of listening to a small portion of the player base anyway? Well, my dear viewer, you would be right. But even if these comments didn't exist, my point still stands. Simulated Battle Trial is not an endgame mode that I believe is worth the player's time right now. Anybody who's played the game as much as I have could tell you that this is a no-brainer. But as someone that went through 700 floors of tower just for the fancy title, the least that I could do was give my full-fledged review of this game mode anyway. So I'm going to talk about the good, the bad, and what I think could be improved about Simulated Battle Trial in Zenless Zone Zero. Personally, I'm not too big on the idea of a boss rush in most of the games I play, but ZZZ is the perfect game for a mode like this considering the combat is very good. First up, Miasma is very good for this game mode. I actually think that this is the one game mode where Miasma, for once, is not a nuisance to deal with. One of the key differences between Vanilla and Glory Tower is the addition of these modifiers that change up the gameplay. I won't talk too much about the modifiers here, but just know that every modifier has all enemies start with a full bar of miasmic health, regardless of which enemy they are. I actually enjoy this change a lot. Miasmic health bars, when depleted, refill energy gauges by a set amount, and this tower loves to throw smaller enemies at you like crazy. So considering the name of the game being endurance rather than speedy clears or scores, having Miasma be a free clip reload at pivotal moments in the fight is something I found to be very refreshing. One thing that certain floors did that I like as well is that they will spawn a second elite enemy in a boss fight once the main enemy's health bar has gotten to a specific point. These would be at points of the fight where you just finished a stun phase and blew all your resources. So enemies like this serve to aid the player rather than annoy them. This isn't on all of the elite bosses floors, but it definitely is helpful on the ones that it is on. Sadly, I hate to say this, but this is where the good things I have to say about Glory Tower ends. There are far more negatives that outweigh the positives. So let's just be rash and get into it. The buff selection is not that good and can be improved. One thing that I didn't mention up to this point is that the modifiers players could select in between floors would also provide buffs to your agents. These buffs would either be applied immediately or would require the player to meet a certain condition in order to be received. My issue with this comes from two things. The selection of buffs are not that good, and the fact that the players only have 3 choices out of the bag of modifiers to choose from is pretty annoying. There are only 3 modifiers you'd want to choose for this tower: the Sheer Force one, the Disorder one, and the one that gives a second ultimate to the first agent who uses it. I have played with every single modifier this tower has to offer, across 3 to 4 differing teams between Anomaly and Rupture agents, and if you're confused as to where my attacker agents are, the attacker agents I have on my account do not have nearly enough iframes for me to bring them into this tower, and since the entire point of playing this tower past the premium currency is for the demon medals, then there's no point in banging my head against the wall playing Haramasa without him dying of something that isn't twink death. Shame, I know. Circling back, not only are the vast majority of buffs bad, but due to the fake roguelike element of this mode giving you 3 options to choose from, you could be forced into taking a buff that actively hinders your performance as opposed to helping it. I ended up taking the heavy hitter or HP replenishing modifiers whenever this did happen to me. One thing I think the devs could improve about these modifiers is to give the players a choice between all the modifiers instead of just 3. Yes, you're allowed to change modifiers in between floors, but sometimes I've come across bosses that would heavily prefer one of the 2 class-specific modifiers and would have a selection of 3 that just didn't have the one that I needed. I think that allowing the players to have a choice in the matter would benefit this mode a lot more. The enemy selection is low and poorly paced. The initial climb up the first 50 floors had a decent arrangement of enemies to deal with. However, once you reach floor 100 onwards, the selection of enemies used goes from 50 to about 15. The repetition of specific enemies in the tower becomes very noticeable, and it can get boring very quickly. I understand that the newer enemies released in 2.2 onwards cannot be added to this tower until the next update, but the devs don't have any excuse for the selection of enemies to be this small. Multiple significant story bosses are missing from this tower. I understand that it's to highlight the new miasmic bosses, but there are bosses that are in Deadly Assault that were released before 2.1, UCC, Deborah, hell, they could even put Bringer in here and I wouldn't have an issue with it. There's also a decent amount of normal elite enemies that aren't present here either. Instead, the tower loves to spam 4 particular enemies in general: Tepes, these fat frogs that I hate, this shielded robot that's weak to fire, and miasmic Jane. The devs seem to have gotten very lazy after floor 100 and proceeded to randomly generate floors from a small selection of enemies. This is so apparent that there were even instances where I fought Tepes twice in a row. This isn't inherently the devs' fault. They didn't expect people to play over 500 floors worth of this tower, so they're not going to put that much effort into coding it better. All the more reason as to why I don't think you should take this mode seriously, but we'll get to that later. The one thing that I think the devs could do to improve upon this is to simply increase the amount of enemies that the tower randomly selects from. This will be easier now than ever, considering that we have a lot more elite enemies and bosses in the game now compared to 2.1's release. Resetting fights is very frustrating. If you're someone that thinks that constantly resetting in DA and Shiyu for the perfect runs is stupid, let me tell you that that's all you'll be doing in the Glory Tower. You could choose to ignore perfect runs and just climb the tower mindlessly to improve your score, but the demon medal automatically gives you more points doing that anyways, so you're incentivized to play perfect regardless. And no, you can't cheese demon medals by using Caesar's shield either, because even if you have the shield gauge up, getting hit results in removing the demon medal chance for that floor. So Caesar, the character that the tower was literally designed for, is rendered completely useless for this newer version of it once you get all the polychromes. Another thing that absolutely sucks about this tower is that it punishes you for quick swapping, a very important part of many team comps and rotations. This has resulted in thousands of run resets for me because my main DPSs love to hang out on the floor for a bit and bust it down sexual style for some unknown reason. More on this at 5. This is especially the case with 1.x units like Jane, who are extremely animation heavy. This usually means that if I end an attack while a monster is about to start their own, quick swapping will lead to the rat eating shit, forcing me to restart the entire fight. Usually, agents getting hit after quick swapping doesn't really matter in the other mode, but considering that the main purpose of these floors is to play perfectly, it gets very annoying when you have to restart a fight that you're already 5 minutes into because you accidentally quick swap. And that's another thing too, these fights are really long, longer than the average Shiyu defense or deadly assault run. Enemies in the tower have way more health and days, so there's going to be 2 specific points in the fight that are going to be the roughest at all times: the beginning of the fight and the end of the stun phase. The beginning is a lot less punishing considering the miasmic health bars refill your agent's energy, but if you don't kill the boss within the first stun phase, then you're going to be stuck in this predicament where you've just wasted all your resources and it don't have anything to iframe through the boss's attacks again. This is mainly prominent on floors that don't spawn the miasmic enemy after the boss reaches a certain health threshold. You now have a choice of either playing for a stun again while risking getting hit and wasting more time, or just spamming ultimates the moment you get them so that you clear the floor and be done with it. Now this isn't that big of an issue with anomaly agents, but their fights take twice as long considering that they don't rely on the stun phase to deal damage. I am 100% okay with the fact that these are tests of endurance, but it's still extremely frustrating when stuff like this happens. This is by far the most annoying thing about Glory Tower, and sadly, there's nothing I can really recommend to improve this aspect of it. This is just simply how gameplay in Zenless goes. But because there's an added factor of having to play perfectly here, it adds this layer of stress to each fight that's unwarranted. It's immensely frustrating having to reset a run at the tail end of it. I'm less so upset at the fact that it's difficult, more so upset at the fact that it's super time consuming. I've reset it over 100 times on miasmic Jane alone, and let me tell you, this is not a fun and challenging experience. Constantly resetting on bosses that take upwards of 7 minutes to fight is not fun and is not something that players should train themselves for in the coming future. And speaking of training, that transitions to my last point about the tower. This mode conditions you into playing the game worse. One would think that a game mode that removes visual cues needed to perform well would automatically improve a player's skill the more that they play it. But after playing over 700 floors of this nonsense, I noticed that my gameplay was getting considerably worse as the climb went on. Yes, I did get every demon medal in succession, but I had to play like a coward to do so, relying on long EX skills that had endless amounts of iframes and spamming ultimates the moment I got them. I made sure that the enemy was getting staggered for about 80% of the fight, lest I wanted to start over again if I didn't. Originally, I was planning on doing this entire tower with only my Banyue premium team, but after floor 300, I said fuck it and just brought in Yishuan instead. These fights take so long to the point that you're better off speedrunning it with a Void Hunter of your choice than actually engaging with the tower and enemies mechanics. The only times that I would have to actually play for stun rotations were on the bigger bosses like Pompeii, Marionettes, and the Priest, but on other bosses bosses like Fiend, Jane, and Hugo, I just find myself spamming EX skills to make sure that I can guarantee safety for my run. This game mode has conditioned me so much to the point that I instinctively pause the game the moment I get hit while outside of the tower game mode. Now granted, I have finished the climb and this doesn't necessarily happen that much anymore, but that doesn't change the fact that this mode is still mind-numbing. Could this be due to the fact that I made the ascent in less than 3 weeks? Absolutely. But even if you played around 10 to 20 floors a day, you'd still notice the repetition in enemies. You'd still develop bad habits. I can't in good faith recommend this game mode to people looking to get better at the game because it actively doesn't do that. You don't play this game mode to get better. In fact, it actually harms the way how you play the video game. And that's all due in part to the fact that the gameplay loop is significantly different compared to every other endgame mode. At least with Deadly Assault, the game rewards you for going above and beyond and is a good way to gauge your account power and player skill. But with the tower, the only thing that matters is player skill, and even then, the longer you play, the more it diminishes because of how mind-numbing the gameplay is. This is all the more reason why I believe that this mode should not be taken seriously at all by any player, at least until some updates are done to change it. Well, I've done enough complaining for now, but what do I think the devs need to do to improve this game mode and make it more engaging? Like I mentioned earlier, they need to give the players more freedom as to what modifiers they want to choose, and they also need to increase the enemy selection substantially and randomize the floors better to make the grind less monotonous. But the real question here is, how do we incentivize the players to play this endgame mode even after all these potential changes? And the answer to that is simple. We make the simulated battle tower a monthly resetting endgame mode. It would be similar to Dislight's tower system, where the player would have to climb 50 floors in both an easy and hard mode tower in order to gain all premium currency. This could be a simple monthly reset mode that can entice players to bring out older characters like Caesar again, and as new content comes to the game, the tower can be updated not only with new enemies, but new modifiers and new potential gameplay changes as well, keeping the mode nice and fresh. The only problem I would have with making this change though is how to deal with the endless aspect of the tower if we were to add a monthly reset to it. I have no issues with keeping it in, since I think a month is more than enough time for people that want to climb to something like floor 1000. And if anything, we could treat the tower resets like rank seasons, giving players a badge at the end of each month that showcases their progression per season and how many floors they climbed up. If you guys have any suggestions yourself on how to transition the tower into a monthly endgame mode, feel free to share them in the comments below. And that about does it for my thoughts on the simulated battle trial. Overall, it's a decent mode, but there's no incentive to keep playing it once you get all the polychrome rewards. Here's hoping that the devs actually do something with the mode in the near future. Thank you guys so much for watching all the way, and I really appreciate it. As always, I've got to get started on the next one. I'll catch you guys later. Bye-bye.